Hi, I'm Morgan Poliquin, President and CEO of Almadex Minerals. We're a prospecting, royalty, exploration company listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture.
Morgan, hello. Nice. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you. Almadex Minerals, market capitalization of $23 million Canadian. You've got $18 million in cash. I'm sometimes, when I look through your presentation, the question I've got is, what is this company? It's a strange animal. Are you a project generator? Perhaps you could kind of describe to me in your own words what you feel Almadex Minerals is.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think that's the key question, and really we're the result of Almaden, the predecessor company, was founded and taken public in 1986. So we're really the result of 40 odd years of exploration, and that's precisely what I would call ourselves as a prospect generator. We generate the exploration projects in the portfolio, and some of them date back to those early days. We have generated royalties through the exploration process, in the sense that we may have sold those projects or joint ventured them and have retained royalty ownership of those assets. So there's royalties, exploration projects that are ongoing, and of course I'm the principal prospector in the company, as well as the president and CEO, and so we're continuing to generate them, and we like to generate our projects from first principles, regional exploration programs, and hopefully staking of claims without underlying ownership. So that process has gone on for quite some time, and so the large sort of diversity of assets and projects result from the same business activity, which is prospecting and generation of new projects through that process.
It's interesting you call yourself a prospector, because normally when people call themselves a prospector, it's without the benefit of a technical education or without a geological degree. But you've got a geological degree, don't you? In fact, you've got several.
Well, I'm second generation in this business. My father's a geological engineer. He's our founder and current chairman, and I consider myself a prospector first because really obviously the technical skills. I'm a geological engineer of a master's studying epithermal deposits in New Zealand, the University of Auckland, and a PhD in geology from Exeter Camborne School of Mines, and but really I consider, I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but I really think there's the technical aspects, the scientific aspects, but ultimately there's a bit of an art form to dreaming up new ideas and projects from first principles. So and ultimately it's boots on the ground to test them out. So I think of it as prospecting overall.
You view the approach to mineral exploration as slightly different to or kind of prospecting to the traditional kind of role of the exploration geologist, perhaps. It's a crossover in that?
I would say so. I mean, a lot of exploration, I would argue that the vast majority of exploration today is project or what we might call brownfields, and there's tremendous potential to exercise the woo-woo there too, of thinking out of the box when things have been explored for many years. But on the other hand, our advanced computing capacity now allows for old data sets to be completely retooled, analyzed, and in fact AI and machine learning is viewed as the critical element now in reviewing old data sets in brownfield settings. But I've focused my exploration on greenfields exploration, brand new conceptual exploration, and I feel that having all the tools at your disposal with respect to methodologies, we use age determinations, actually trying to find the age of the rocks that you're seeking to explore, as part of our exploration process, and have done in the past successfully. So having all those tools at your disposal, but ultimately it's a different kind of exploration, I would argue, greenfields, first principles exploration, and for me it's the most exciting kind, because you're really trying to do something new, and creative out of where there's nothing. That's the harder path to go, and it takes many years to develop ideas and to bring them even up to the stage where you can drill them. But sometimes it happens very quickly. In fact, if you have a good idea, and you're more likely to find an area that's not competitive. So if you have a good idea that people haven't been contemplating, for example, and we did that in Mexico, we had identified an entirely new belt of intrusive rocks, magmatic hydrothermal systems associated with them, and volcanic settings that weren't really identified in terms of how they pieced together. And so following that belt, we were able to find alteration zones that were unstaked, that had never been staked and never been drilled. And so the concept paid off really quickly in terms of defining new areas to drill and explore. And indeed, our first hole on one of our legacy projects that Almadex has a royalty on, at the Ixtaca deposit, the first hole hit, I forget exactly the number, but I think it was 170 meters of 3 grams or something of that nature. So sometimes those conceptual exploration programs can evolve very rapidly, but I don't want to belabor the point, but it's very different, I would say, than brownfields exploration.
It's really interesting because I've been actually doing a little talk or preparing some work on mineral systems, and the mineral systems approach to geology is that if you can find out where the structure is and you've got the right fluid and you've got the right metal content, you can source metal in one place, transport it in a fluid, and if you've got the right trapping mechanism, the right precipitation place, it's not just that you expect to find a mineral deposit there, but there has to be a mineral deposit there. Just the laws of science dictate that there has to be an accumulation of minerals in that particular point. So really what you've just been describing to me is conceptual mineral system analysis. You're saying, look, if we've got the right edge rocks and we've got the right structure and we've got the right fluids, then there has to be a deposit over here, and you drill tested it and boom, you hit it. Also going back to your point about explorers, most exploration at the moment is brownfields, and I think that is because the availability of capital. So investors want to have the lowest risk route to a discovery as possible, because everybody knows that mineral exploration is a low probability chance of success business. You get the reward once you're onto a discovery, but it's very difficult to find that first discovery, and therefore capital is typically only available where you've got a rich data set. And I think what you've just described to me is the fact that you've got access to capital. You've been doing this for 40 years. So you've got your $18 million at the moment in your treasury, which gives you the latitude or the freedom to test conceptual ideas. Is that fair?
I think that is fair. When we have partners approach us looking for properties, they'll often say, these aren't advanced enough, and they will have maybe less capital assets than we have. And it's interesting to hear that because, I think in the past, junior exploration companies that didn't have a property were quite willing to take on early stage projects from call it a prospect generator like us, but now they need advanced assets. And I think that does speak to the capital markets that are informing those companies. You have to have something with a resource. You have to have something that's immediately actionable. I don't want to hear about an exploration story. So I really agree with you that capital markets are driving that. What we've tried to do is not only reduce, I would say that the early stage exploration prospecting, coming up with a concept, maybe going out in a helicopter to check it out or on a donkey or what have you, that's really inexpensive. And generally speaking, staking projects are much the same. So it's really the drilling stage that really
choose the capital.
It really is, and I would argue the risk capital matrix is where it comes together in the worst possible place is first stage drilling, conceptual early stage drilling, and so we've tried to reduce that as well by having our own drills and enabling. I can tell you this is years ago, but we drilled 160 kilometers at our Ixtaca deposit. And I'm just going by memory, but I think we averaged about $40 a meter drilling cost. So that's the kind of what we're trying to do in our matrix. But I do believe that there is another element here of risk that's really changed. The social regulatory risk is exploded. And so often companies will try to focus on a developed asset where there's a better understanding of how those ultimately permitting risks can be reduced. So I think that hinders early stage exploration because those risks are often unknown and cannot be quantified. I mean, you might find a new project and stake a claim on the side of a mountain and have no idea where those regulatory risks could go, but they may be better established with a more advanced brownfields location.
Does that mean that you end up working in a place that you're more comfortable with? Does that mean that you work where your drill rigs already are? I mean, where are your drill rigs?
Yeah, we've always said right from the get-go before we started these kinds of programs is that we're going to focus on North America, meaning Canada, Mexico, and the United States, but more specifically the Western Cordillera in those three countries. And we're in Vancouver. The bulk of our drill rigs are in Mexico, but we have one in the United States. And, the way we've seen things is the geology is very similar, time zones, and so on. We speak the language in Mexico. They're part of NAFTA. So ultimately, there's some regulatory consistency there, although not really, on the small scale of permitting or early stage things and whatnot. But nevertheless, geologically, on the other side of it, these things are there are tremendous opportunities, and I think even in places that are mature like Nevada in the United States, there's opportunities to re-examine magmatic events to find new things through conceptual exploration. And certainly, for me, Mexico over the last 20 odd years has been a tabula rasa of geologic opportunities with that we've demonstrated, new belts of magmatic hydrothermal systems and related volcanic edifices that really haven't been studied. So to me, we have everything we need as an early stage explorer in the west side of North America.
So what are your primary properties at the moment? What are your primary targets? How are you going to make the next discovery? What excites you at the moment?
Yeah, I think obviously there's a refocus on kind of what we call high tech industrial metals, and searching out lithium projects is something we can turn our brains to and certainly think about. But really, our bread and butter the last 20 odd years has been magmatic hydrothermal systems, and by that I mean when a layperson asks me what I do, I say I'm a volcano hunter, and an extinct volcano hunter. But in magmatic hydrothermal systems, that is the hydrothermal fluids that evolved from a deep-seated porphyry system. You got everything from copper, molybdenum at depth, through to gold, silver, epithermal deposits, related skarn and replacement base metal deposits all around that environment. And so it's a very rich environment, and understanding, just back to you were talking about how mineral deposits form, and I believe it's reasonable to say that mineral deposits geologically are the most studied pinpoint in geologic time. You've got people go and study a mineral deposit in great detail beyond what you would study any other geographic location. And so there's a lot known about mineral deposits, and understanding their distribution in time and space allows the prospector to go look under cover, as we say, or indeed look for brand new ones that may even crop out. And we think that magmatic hydrothermal environment includes copper and metals that are essential for the changing economy. And so that really excites me, because I've got a couple of belts that I feel have great potential. We've staked claims along them, and so we'll continue doing that both in the United States and unfortunately in Mexico right now. For the last 5 years, new concessions are there's been a sort of a ban on new concessions. So So that's hindered, as you might imagine, our investment in Mexico. That's hindered our abilities to acquire new properties. It's not possible in Mexico the last 4 odd years. So we're hopeful that will change in the future, and our intellectual capital in Mexico will continue to be able to utilize. But we do that sort of work outside of Mexico as well.
Is there an argument for a company like yours to be private, to use your in-house talents, your exploration skill set, your heritage of knowing how to manage cash flow, the royalty portfolio, monetizing assets, and then rather than having a public vehicle from which you shoot off, or you carve off elements, why not? Is there an argument for being private and then actually bringing the most mature asset as a public vehicle and retaining a stake in that?
I think you make an interesting point, and my friends, my peers and friends in the industry, will tell you I've often said that to them years ago, is that if you can finance such an endeavor, then that would probably be the most interesting lifestyle for an individual, to be a prospector. But of course, what I can tell you is, a lot of our work involves machines like a TerraSpec, and a TerraSpec is enables you to measure with using infrared absorbance the mineralogy, and that can really change the way you explore or evaluate a prospect, I should say. And that machine, I think, is $70,000 US to buy, and that's just one. So obviously, there's a capital constraint, is what I'm trying to say. So if you're able to finance early stage exploration, we like to use the drill as a prospecting tool. We like to use induced polarization geophysics as a prospecting tool. We have in-house magnetic. So all of those things cost money, and I think we found that our abilities as a public company to finance those activities are obviously enhance the exploration. But you bring up an interesting point.
I mean, because life is easier if you're private. It's going public is a difficult enterprise. You've got two sides of the business to deal with. You've got the internal technical side of things, and you've got the external capital market side of things. And because essentially what you're doing is you're turning over projects, you're using your drill rigs, you're maintaining royalty value, but you haven't at present got a lead project for the market to get their head around. I mean, if I ask you what's your lead project, I don't know what your answer would be. What is your lead project?
Yeah, I don't know what my answer would be either immediately. The most advanced project is we've just produced a 43101 compliant resource on a zinc silver project in the Yukon, which we own 100% interest of. And it's a very robust looking resource. In that case, it could rapidly move into more of a development proposition. It could move from resource to PEA in theory quickly, and so that would be our most advanced and potentially our lead project. But I think I'm very happy to say that that kind of endeavor of advancing that through potential economic studies and it's really not what we're going to focus on here. We would prefer, in that instance, to find a partner that wants to take a project perhaps into production of that style, a zinc focused producer or developer. I think would be our preference there. I can say that it's not your lead. It's not your lead project in your presentation. You're the first person. If you flick through your presentation, Logan's kind of project number 3 that comes out, or no, 4. It's first of all is I think it's Davis, and then it's Merit, then it's San Pedro. Yeah, interesting. Well, that's the two, San Pedro and the Paradise Davis project in Nevada. Those are two things that we drilled last year. Kind of first pass from our perspective drill programs, testing concepts, and both of them had very interesting drill results that didn't capture the market's imagination necessarily. And so that's why they're first, is because we we plan at the moment to do more work there, of course, this year. At any point, we could, again, we're quite happy to form partnerships. I'm just looking at Paradise Davis here. We hit July 15th, we reported 13.7 meters of 2.3 grams there. And at our San Pedro project, we hit December 6th about 4.5 meters in our own in-house drilling of over 600 grams silver, in something that's a little confusing, quite frankly, on trying to figure out its distribution. And it's, but we've got some good results from our early drill programs, and those will, hopefully we'll be able to flesh those out and remove some confusion or create a better understanding of both of them, so that we can maybe find some more advanced partners. And so we've got a number of projects that none of which are sort of past the threshold of discovery of something substantive that is moving into resource or that sort of thing. So we've got a kind of a panorama of exploration projects, all of which we think are worthy to drill and advance. But also we're doing that prospecting. It's until, and I think that's people's difficulty with understanding us is because most juniors are focused, as we've discussed, on an advanced asset. People ask, well, what is that advanced asset? And I say, well, I'm exploring to find it.
So let's go to your shareholder register. So what's the shareholder makeup?
Yeah, it's diversified quite a bit. There's been two. They're not so recent spinouts. In just so that you understand it, the consolidated company Almaden, in 2015, Almadex was spun out from Almaden, and the reason behind that is that Almaden discovered we discovered this Ixtaca, I mentioned it, deposit in Mexico, this gold-silver deposit. And it was clearly moving towards advanced studies and permitting at that time. So we felt that diluting the exploration projects was not the right thing. So Almadex spun out from that. And that ownership at that time, which is, I think, largely stayed consistent with Almadex, is really people that have supported, funded prospect generation and like that aspect of, we've had a lot of support from newsletter writers that advocate prospect generation. We have a large Mexican shareholder who likes Mexican projects, who is involved in all three projects. Almadex then went on almost immediately to make a really interesting copper-gold porphyry discovery in Mexico in 2016. And by 2018, Newcrest Mining was interested enough in that project to want to get involved, and they did so in an equity manner in a third company that's dedicated to. So essentially, we had a spin-out from the spin-out, and that's called Azucar Minerals, and Newcrest is involved in that. And I would say that the ownership of that company is kind of very project-focused, people who like advancing a copper-gold porphyry. So Almadex, despite these three companies in our portfolio that have evolved through this organic process, I think Almadex is the one that has the shareholders that are largely, I guess the term would be retail, but we don't have large funds. It's widely dispersed amongst people that have largely supported us. For, in some cases, we know shareholders that have been shareholders for decades, and have hopefully done well over the years as we've made discoveries in those moments. Yeah.
Good. Those long relationships are key, aren't they? So what's the plan for this year? What's on the cards for the first half of the year?
Yeah, we've got a few things on our plate here, as we've spoken about. I'd like to advance the Logan project to the point of being able to get it moved along, and we have luckily in our projects no major obligations that are guiding or forcing our exploration hand, but we have Logan to advance, and I hope I would like to see it in a partnership that's dedicated to that project. But we've got some things we'll do there to help that. But really, our exploration focus is going to be on moving beyond these early stage interesting results at Davis and Paradise, and and more thoroughly testing them with our own drill rigs. In the absence of finding partners for those two projects, that's what we'll be doing. We'll also be pushing forward our regional exploration programs, and I anticipate acquiring a number of new projects this year based on a whole bunch of work that we've been doing behind the scenes. And there are other projects in the portfolio that aren't in the presentation that we anticipate advancing. I would say we have a legacy portfolio, and in the absence of finding partners for projects, what we'd like to do is test them. We have two projects in the Spence's Bridge Belt, Merritt and Nicoamen, and of course West Haven, our neighbor in the Spence's Bridge Belt. We're the original kind of mover and shaker. Almadex, the first projects staked and identified in that belt were on our old exploration program. So
West Haven, that's the Shovel Nose property.
That's right. Yeah, they've defined a very nice resource there. And there are so we have projects that are quite exciting, I would say, from an exploration point of view in that belt. That one of which has never been drill tested, Nicoamen. So we anticipate advancing those as well. They're in the presentation, as you mentioned. And then there's other projects that don't make the presentation, the legacy projects that we'd like to drill. So we have a portfolio that we've been carrying, and I think we have the the financial capacity and drilling capacity to do early stage testing on a number of projects to kind of move through the legacy assets. Every project requires attention and mental time, if nothing else. And so doing this early stage drilling, I think, will be informative and help move through it. And ultimately, if it's not there, you want to get rid of it and move on to other things. So we'll be doing a little bit of that, as well as some new, hopefully some new projects, or early stage exploration.
Have you got a monetary figure in terms of the budget you'd like to spend on exploration, either for the 6 months or for the full year?
I don't have an exact figure to give you now. We often think in meters and that sort of thing, with having your own drill. But on the Davis Paradise and the San Pedro project, we're just defining our drill programs right now. We had one underway in December in Nevada, but we were sort of snowed out, as it were. And we hope very shortly to be able to provide an overview of what precisely we're going to do this year. We're already in February, mid-February, but we'll do that shortly to help the market and our shareholders understand what exactly the plans are. But those are basically it. We'll be doing targeted prospect conceptual type drilling on both those two projects in Mexico and the United States. They won't be expansive, large drill programs to begin with, because we're not at, systematic drilling of a defined target. We have multiple targets to test.
Yeah, and presumably it's very reactive. You put a few holes here, you have 1,000 meters planned for this bit, or 500 meters here and a bit over there, and then you see how you go. You see what the rocks you intersect are, see what the results are. So, typically, do you kind of drill to 2,000 or 3,000 meters in a campaign to justify moving the rig there and getting everybody motivated?
That's always better, but we're also happy. Like the Ixtaca discovery was a one-hole program, and we got very lucky that the first hole hit. But it was a conceptual target where we had a whole bunch of things: a structure, good soil geochemistry, some float, and a large steam-heated alteration zone under which we hoped we might find a not exposed blind epithermal vein. And indeed, we got very fortunate, obviously, and hit on one hole. But we're happy. What I'm trying to say is we're happy to do drill a concept, and I think owning your own drills allows you to do that. So ideally you have 4 or 5 targets that you want to drill test, and logistically it's easier to do that. But we're happy just to drill a hole, and as I say, the earlier you kind of test your concepts, I think that speaks to the sort of question you had about exploration in general, is that there's a reluctance to drill early stage projects for the capital reasons you mentioned. In general out there, that's why people like advanced projects. But also, you could kill your project that you've spent a bunch of time and money optioning from somebody else. Yes. So there's a reluctance to kill your project, whereas we don't mind killing our projects because spending time on a project, spending too much time on a project where you shouldn't is a waste of time and money.
Yes, but equally you don't want to drill too early until you've actually understood why you're drilling where you are and is that the best place. And there's plenty of there's lots of good work that you can do at a low cost to make sure that when you do drill, it's the best informed choice that you're making.
I agree, absolutely. You need to ensure that geologically, with what's exposed, there's plenty of places I've been to where there's a discovery or not being made, and there's an outcrop right there that nobody's actually looked at. So it's remarkable, and that seems to be the opportunity, I would say, in exploration today, is that I'm all for using tools, AI, machine learning, but it's only as good as the data that you put into it. And if somebody hasn't been boots there, you can't be boots on the ground. Maybe that's too metaphysical, but I really think that really it comes down to that sense of prospecting and going and looking.
Yeah, good geology. The Mark I eyeball, attached to a brain. It's not just enough to observe. You've got to be able to interpret as well, and walk. That boot leather is so that it's the holy trinity of brain, boot, and eyeball. Observation skills, good geological knowledge, and willingness to get out and explore the last outcrop that most other people don't want to get to. Coming to drill rigs, they are an asset because you can drill your own holes cheaply, but they're also an asset because you can put them to work for other people. Do you ever do that? Do you ever contract out your rigs to third parties?
Absolutely. In fact, the reason we were able to do the exploration we did last year and wind up, our last financials reported are 18 million in the third quarter of 2022. I think it was 16.8 in the third quarter of 2021, and without a financing. And so we essentially were able to achieve that through third-party drilling. So, for example, obviously when you're doing the type of drilling that we've been speaking about, drilling, with fluidity on your own project, maybe drilling a few holes, thinking about what you've had coming back later, it allows you to do third-party drilling in the interim. And in fact, you want to, because what I would say is we've spoken of them as drill rigs, but really that's just the physical plant. It's people. And we've our drillers, some of which we've been working with more than a decade, and we've trained from scratch how to drill, and have moved on to be foremen and that sort of thing. So you want to keep people busy for their for their, you want to, and you don't want to lose your team and so on and so forth. So third-party drilling it has its benefits in multiple ways, obviously, but it's helped us maintain our exploration programs without diluting ourselves and our cash position.
What are the contracts looking like this year?
A little grimmer this year. Obviously, these are more difficult times, and particularly in Mexico, where the bulk of our drills are. There's a lot of perception and real issues down there with respect to permitting, and then we've got the general markets are not as supportive, perhaps, as they were last year. Right now, anyway, in funding, we have a few things cooking and brewing, but as yet, no sort of large long-term contracts in place at the moment.
It's funny because the capital markets feel as if they're much better than they were last year. I guess the drill plans for 2022 were put in place in 2021, but even that was a pretty terrible year in the capital markets. I get the impression, perhaps I'm wrong, but the conferences that I've seen so far this year, and the general mood and the gold price and the copper price and the tin shortages, and if you look across the suite of metals that you're talking about here, particularly the magmatic hydrothermal suite, they seem to be kind of better supported, and I would have expected that you were seeing a pickup in the exploration activities in the Western Cordillera of North America.
It's interesting. It's a bit of a touchstone. Our CFO and has been obviously that's part of one of his duties, and is working with these drill contracts, and we have seen a little bit in the short term here a decline of. In fact, we have one client who wanted to drill, but is held up apparently on a finance on their financing. So I hope that we're not a canary in the coal mine, and that things will shift. But at the moment, I see a little bit of a reduction in people's interest in drilling and spending money at the moment.
Funny, it is true that a theme that I have seen emerging is that the smaller companies are still struggling to get financed. So certainly it's a case of the haves and the have-nots, and the people who don't have money still struggling to raise money, and the people that do have money don't need it. So yeah. Well, I think it'll be really helpful for you when you're ready with your plans, with your work plans, to come back to the market with a kind of a more granular action plan for the year. To say this is where you're putting 1,000 meters, or one drill hole, or 5 drill holes, or whatever it is, so that the market's got some a better handle on. Well, it's a question of expectation management, really, isn't it? And yet, within that, one always has to realize that exploration scale, prospect level exploration is a high risk business. You may get technical successes without commercial successes.
Absolutely, and we are reluctant to hype these early stage projects. That's not our instinct. Until you make that discovery, and I mean, I always liked our the Ixtaca project. We had that for I think a decade. Is that right? Yes, a decade before we made the discovery there, with various different partners coming and going and that sort of a thing. So, so it would have been, as an example, in my history, that project in the presentation would have probably, after the 3 partners had explored it, let me think, one of which did some drilling, I think it would have been not even on the presentation. It would have been number 12 on the list, or, in fact, I'm going to go back and look at our old presentations. I bet you in those years it wasn't until we drilled that hole, it didn't even make the presentation. So that's kind of the, it's hard to, we need to communicate what we plan to do, of course, and I think you make a very good point. But I think, these are all early stage projects, many of which, obviously, we've selected them, and we like to think the odds, are higher that they've gone through a sieve than just the average odds. But that all being said, the odds are long that any one of these.
Maybe you could present it in a different way, rather than kind of naming prospects or saying that. Maybe you could present it in terms of how you're allocating your capital. With this is going into drilling. We're drilling X meters, and we've allocated between, I don't know, $1 and $3 million for drilling, or whatever the numbers are. We're doing prospecting, trenching, sampling, geophysical work on 10 prospects, and we're doing conceptual desk work studies on 50 projects. I mean, maybe that's a different way of just kind of having that, the resource pyramid. I don't know if you've seen the Randgold Resources and now Barrick presentations. They always talk about this kind of the resources pyramid, with advancing your projects up the stages, and you get fewer and fewer more advanced projects, but you have this hopper, or this base of conceptual stage projects, which may be a way of you to describe how your capital allocation is and your time allocation is, and where you see the value growth steps.
Yeah, well, that's a very good suggestion. I think it's very hard to really come up with a budget for an early stage project when we're exploring in the way we are, using the drill rig to do some preliminary testing and see where it goes. So yeah, I think people understanding how you're you make an interesting suggestion to have it more broadly and categorized like that. If people find that useful, that's something that that could be contemplated. Yeah.
When did you join? I see you graduated from your first degree in 1994, which was an auspicious year for graduate geologists. When did you join Almaden, as it was?
Well, I think formally right around that time. But I grew up my father's field assistant, so as soon as I could walk, I was running around with him. I basically my entire career has been doing this. I haven't come from Barrack or something like that. So my entire career has been working in this group of companies, predominantly since the mid 90s, really. In Mexico, Mexico changed its legislation in 1992 to allow 100% foreign ownership of mineral concessions, and apart from our work in Nevada and British Columbia, most of it's been dedicated to Mexico.
And when did you take on the role of president or CEO?
I think I think that was around 2009 or so. Okay. Somewhere in there. Yep. That was, of course, when we were one. It was all consolidated in one company. Yeah. I can't recall the exact date, but I was somewhere around in there, and my father became chairman. Yeah. And
is he still active? Does he still like to come out to the field and see the projects?
Yes, he's still active. He's 82. But very engaged and very valuable, I might say, because we've through those spinouts, there's been some quite some changes in the boards, because the boards are focused on there's different focus to each company, but we've been really fortunate to be guided by a great deal of mining experience over the years, and really value that. I mean, he's seen whether it's deals, structure of deals, through to early exploration programs, the pitfalls, and the drilling operations. I mean, he's seen it all over 60 years.
Well, and what a pleasure to work with your dad for those decades. I mean, my dad's 84, and it would have been great if we were in the same industry. I would have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I a lot of people say, how on earth can you work with your dad? But I've much like the sentiment you're expressing, I've always, I feel very fortunate, and it's been a great journey, and our objectives are to make a couple more discoveries, before we're done here. So we've built an interesting entity out of born of necessity, really. A lot of people talk about the structure of these kinds of deals, but one thing I'll say about my dad is he was one of the first people to be a technical person in Vancouver, anyway, to start a public company focused on exploration, and he came public with a gold project in Nevada that wound up going into production and was mined out by Homestake, and he struggled greatly. And it was really through joint venture that he was able to actually close his IPO. And the joint venture partner helped him fund his IPO. And of course, those were challenging times in the early 70s. But that was where our more irons in the fire or better strategy evolved from. There's plenty of ideas out there, and if you can find somebody to support any one of those ideas, you can focus more on new ideas, and so really born of necessity, and a lot of our drilling was much the same. For example, we had a joint venture partner in Mexico on one of our what wound up being discovery, Cabal Blanco, and they couldn't find a drill rig. In Mexico, there was a dearth of drill rigs, so we thought, well, let's get a drill rig. So it's kind of evolved spontaneously over the years.
I've been there. We didn't have a drill rig for a project in Central Asia, and we bought a drill rig and started a drilling company. So yeah, I know what happens with the necessity, mother being the necessity being the mother of invention. Does your royalty portfolio have any producing assets? And if it doesn't, when is the first production asset likely to come into play on your royalty portfolio?
Well, it's number one, it doesn't have any. The one that was closest that is now in production, we sold in 2021. Is that right? Yes. For $10 million US. That was the Elk project. So we sold that. And the next one that could be producing is a painful question, because that's through the spin-out process we retained royalties on projects. And we retained a royalty on the Ixtaca project, and it's a wonderful gold-silver discovery I've been speaking to a little bit in Mexico. And unfortunately, it's kind of held up in legal and and permitting challenges in Mexico right now. So, but that's got a feasibility study, and so that would be the most advanced, and no timeline for production there.
But this is the crucial thing, is that you sold a royalty for $10 million, and this is another a good way that one can monetize a legacy project or an asset which has got a long lifetime. So you've always got the option to monetize assets in the future through fund your company through the sale of royalties that you generated.
Yeah, absolutely. And our position at the moment is that once these things are better defined in terms of their permitting and they're advanced sufficiently, then they'll have a lot more value than they do now. And that was the case with the Elk project. Really, we had a royalty there for since the spin-out for many years. We sold the project to Gold Mountain originally anyway, sorry to think out loud, but we had it for a decade, I'm going to say, before we sold it. And we sold it when a production decision was being made. So I think there's a maturity issue there, but you're right, we consider them assets, and of course all royalties, due to the discount rate to royalties relative to mining projects, have a value regardless of the status of permitting and so on. It would appear in the marketplace. So they represent assets that can enhance our capital position, sure.
Well, Morgan, thank you very much for talking me through your company. I look very much I look forward to seeing the work plan for the year with a little bit more granularity, as I think the Canadian phrase. And good luck. I hope you have a good 2023, and I'm hopefully get you back on here soon and to talk through what your plan is, even if it's not on a project by project basis, but by activity by activity.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the questions and the time.